Hey everybody, Coach Hamilton alongside Coach Dunham. As always, we are the A.C.E Football Academy. Coach, we always ask for feedback. We love when our listeners give us, hey, here's what we want to hear you all talk about. Here's what we want to know more about. One of the feedbacks that we often get is that they like it when we disagree. So we kind of thought, hey, why not let's do a entire episode on a topic that you and I blatantly disagree on.
One of your most ridiculous things that you brought up in the history of our podcast.
In our podcast, because if you in time, one of our most
Top 5 changes we would like to see. We need to get more enticing kind of thing.
Yeah, it's also a top 5 downloaded episode for us. So if you haven't listened to it, please go back and download it and listen. But one of the things I brought up was the lack thereof a timeout in soccer.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Let's be honest here.
Listen, he's already backtracking. He
has a timeout. And even when you and I finished high school, this was voted on almost every year that I was at Madison Central. I said no every single time. I think that's what I love about soccer is if your team isn't prepared, you're done. And that's what annoys me about NBA. Oh my gosh. It's like, that's why I didn't watch a lot of basketball. It's like there's a timeout every 5 seconds. There's a TV timeout. There's a team timeout. There's a 20-second timeout. There's a player timeout. I don't know what else is going on. I feel like there's a timeout 1,000 times per game, and it drives me bonkers. Your team needs to just suck it up and play the game.
Okay, so I have this big intro for playing. But he really goes
Well, I for 5 seconds.
Still like that. Today we're discussing in the soccer. But I guess where we should start, now that you've already said your spiel, is can I go with why I think there should be a timeout?
Feel free. I'd love to hear this.
And are you going to interrupt me?
I will not. You give me a nod when you're done. Spiel whatever you got going on.
All right. Here is my side for why timeout should be in soccer. Now, to your point, I don't want 5. I don't want 3. I want a timeout.
Okay.
And especially at the youth level and even through high school, I don't think there's anything wrong with being able to regroup, stabilize the emotions, the things that are happening. I mean, how many times have you been a part of a soccer game when you're like, that team is getting ready to score? If my outside back or my outside midfielder doesn't drop to the far post, or if we don't start pushing that center mid out wide, she's gonna dominate the inside, or even more to the point of, okay, I see how the other team's playing. I would love to make an adjustment. And maybe it's just because I'm a really great coach. And so I see those things on the field. And I'm like, if I could have 5 minutes to rearrange things, and I know your argument is going to be, well, that's what halftime's for. But sometimes those things happen in the second half. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I could win this game if I could regroup for 30 seconds. It wouldn't take me very long, but I need to regroup for 30 seconds and take a holding midfielder and make them an attacking midfielder. And I get it. Sometimes it's like, you're like, well, just yell at them and tell them, hey, you're no longer holding, you're attacking. But for youth athletes, it's more than that. It takes more than me just saying, hey, move to striker. Or, hey guys, we're moving to a 3-4-3 instead of our 4-4-2, right? And I just feel like it makes the game more competitive from a coaching standpoint, where if I'm a better coach than you, I can outcoach you. Because how many, you mentioned basketball earlier, you mentioned football earlier, and I agree with you, there are too many timeouts in both of those sports. But how many times have we seen a coach be outcoached and it affects the impact of the game? You and I both, well, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like I'm a really good coach. I know you are a really good coach. I've seen you do it for a long time. And you don't think that there are games, there are moments in a heated match against Madison Southern in the district finals, or a heated match against, whoever, you couldn't have called a timeout and made a little adjustment that would have changed the game for the better for your team?
You asked me a serious question? Yeah. My response to that is woulda, coulda, shoulda. That's why we practice every day. It's why we do 2-hour practices. It's why we watch film. It's why we drill our players with questions to prepare them for these games. And if you're in that situation, football, I understand your point of view. I get it. And are there moments where you're like, I could take 30 seconds and fix this? Well, that's why we have captains. Hey, Lisa, we're switching to a 3-4. Come here real quick. We're switching to a 3-4-3. Tell the strikers know what's going on. Let your defense know what the rules are. Get it done. And now you're throwing responsibility in teaching leadership in the middle of a game. Is it tough? Do you end up losing sometimes? That's called a teaching moment in life. And I don't think, I get where you're coming from. I give it 100%. But it's one of the things that I love about soccer is you're ready or you're going to learn from it. And that's kind of where I'm at on this. And I watch basketball and I watch football and I watch hockey and I see all these timeouts going on. And I get it. You get a moment to make adjustments, make corrections, make sure there's no misunderstandings, get everybody on the same page. I get it. But you're taking away the opportunity to teach some mental toughness in games where, just like you said, you're playing an arch rival and it's 1-1. There's 8 minutes left to go in the game and you feel like, oh man, I can feel they're about ready to score. Communication's got to get involved. Pre-planning's got to be involved. And, sometimes you're not going to get that win. Even if you have that timeout, doesn't guarantee you're going to get that win.
No, I agree with that. And to your point, I have said on numerous occasions, like, again, I don't know how many listeners we have that have watched me coach before or that I've coached their child or whatever, but sometimes some of the biggest gripes about me as a coach is that I appear to be uninterested. And of course I'm not, but I am of the point to your point, I am of the point to, hey, I work my butt off in trainings.
Right.
And then on game days, it's up to the players, right? But I also think that's unfair. I think you're putting so much pressure, so much emphasis, even on your senior captain to, hey, I need you to make this adjustment. And then if they don't, we lose. Like, versus, hey, there's 5 minutes left. I'm going to take my timeout. And then I can bring my captains over and be like, hey, look, here's the adjustment I'm going to make in the huddle, and now I'm going to make it in the huddle, and then when we go back on the field, you make sure it's in play. So again, kind of what you said, I agree, I understand what you're saying, but I think there are better ways to go about it that in a day of in a time of stress and anxiety and all these things for our athletes, like being able to call a timeout and say, hey, look, I'm sliding you to center mid, and here's what this does to everybody else. I mean, it doesn't take it doesn't take an hour. It doesn't take a minute. Give me 30 seconds. Give me a brief timeout to reevaluate. I mean, what about after a red card? What about, and again, it's not that I'm not working on these things in training, but you don't anticipate a red card. You don't anticipate a broken leg to or torn ACL to your star player. So in those moments, could you imagine the benefits of being able to be like, all right, timeout, give me 30 seconds to rework what we're doing, and then let's go in the game. Like, there are games that even with 10 players, I feel like I could win if I had a moment to get my team refocused.
Yeah, the main thing I heard from you was the fairness in all of this. And I'm going to give you my best dad response. Life's not fair. And it's something I've told to both my kids. It's the two phrases that you hear me say a lot. Life's not fair and life's not free. Okay? So while I get where you're coming from, and while you say you don't want to put that pressure on your captain, I'm on the opposite side. We should be pushing them to be stronger, physically and mentally, and not just your captains. And this is why I like where you learn in the moment to be aware of the situation. Because while you and I are on the sideline and we are like, oh man, I can feel a goal about to happen, they should also be feeling that happening. And they should be communicating, hey, that wing is tearing you up on the outside. Give her some support when they come down that side again. They've got to learn to communicate that. And I don't know that a timeout develops that type of skill set. Where the coaches, just like we see in the NBA, the coaches are doing all the fixing. But in soccer, we have to do it from the sideline, or your players have to work that out as the game goes on.
Which I love. But also, aren't you taking away my ability to coach? I mean, like, in that...
I'm going to cut you off right there. You just said, if you watch me coach in the middle of the game, you don't hear me saying much. So you just said, I do all my preparation during the week, which is where you and I completely agree.
Yep.
That's where we get paid, is preparing them for the week. And go ahead.
But if something happens in that Saturday game, my team shouldn't be punished, isn't the right word, but you know what I mean.
Right.
My team shouldn't be hampered because I can't regroup them for 30 seconds. Again, I'm not asking for 4 timeouts. I'm not asking for 3-minute timeouts. But sometimes, especially at our level, and really at the high school level as well, like, if you gave me 30 seconds, I feel like not only would it make my team better, it would also make me a better coach because I can make those adjustments. Just like, all the other sports. What do they do? They see what's happening, they call timeout, and they make adjustments, right? And I get your point. I understand. Hey, we're making adjustments on the fly, in game, and that's what makes soccer soccer. And I get that. And there's a part of me that sympathizes with that. But again, like I said, I also think you are taking away some of the greatest minds in soccer by 2 minutes left. They earn a corner, down a goal. To be able to call a timeout and draw the 30-second corner kick play, like, how much fun would it be to watch Mikel Arteta and you're already clock in those 5 minutes of a game, in a free kick situation, in a corner kick situation, to be able to call a timeout and, you're Klopp and I'm Arteta and we are drawing up offense and defense against each other. I mean, then you are really seeing what that coach is made of.
I hear you. So let me ask you a few questions to see where your head is on this.
Yeah.
So first question I've got is, how broad is this change? Is this pro leagues only? Is this youth all the way up through pro league? Are we talking about timeouts on like a U6 rec game kind of thing? So what's your outlook on where this timeout starts?
I think you have to start it somewhere where it matters, right? So, not to take anything away from your U6 games, but I think you start it on the select level, or even at the high school level. I think that's where you start it. And your next question is probably going to be like, how many timeouts or whatever. So I think you give each coach one. And it has to be in a stoppage of play. So like, if Dunham is driving down the middle of the field, I can't do, oh, timeout.
That's a great point.
Right?
I should have brought that up.
Right?
Because that would be pretty wild.
So it has to be,
Which makes sense in sports anyway.
kind of like substitutions. Like, if it's your throw in, I can't sub. Right? If it's your throw in, I can't call a timeout. So, but if it's my throw in, I can sub and I can call my. And I do think it's one. To your point, you don't want a stoppage of play every other timeout. Every other.
Of course.
Like it is in football and basketball. So I think you give one. I think it has to be in the second half.
Oh, okay. So we're not saying anywhere in the game, only in the second half.
Second half, and when you are in control of the ball in a dead ball.
I'll tell you right now, I don't like that. I think if you're going to give a timeout, it's any timeout the entire game.
Okay.
If you use it in the first 10 minutes, your timeouts are done. And that's just how I'm seeing it.
Right.
As far as it being out of play, I think either coach should be allowed to call a timeout anytime it's out of play. I don't know that I like it's his throw-in, but I don't get a timeout. I think that's kind of odd.
How do you feel about, and again, this is a whole conversation for another day, but do you feel like you should be able to sub even when it's not your throw-in?
No.
Like if you're standing by yourself on the side.
All rules still apply in the game.
Right.
You're just taking a timeout.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay? So, and I get that. So what about the clock? I mean, as the ref stopping the clock, now you said high school level, so let's say we're in a high school game. It's a throw in out of bounds, guy says timeout, is that clock still rolling and you get 30 seconds, or how's that roll out?
I think this is the timeout issue, right? I think this is the biggest question mark behind a timeout. What are you going to do with the clock? And I think I've gone back and forth in my brain on this. Like when I first, 2 years ago when we did our top 5 rule changes, I think I was, no, when I call a timeout, the clock stops. But you talk about like, that's what's great about soccer. You're like, hey, this game is going to last an hour and then we can go home. Right? And I think that's that's one of the draws for soccer. You know how you're going to be there.
That's true.
And so, all right, yeah, the clock's going to run. You get 30 seconds in your huddle, but then the clock doesn't stop. And so now you really have to be strategic when you take that timeout.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking a timeout with 2 minutes left because I want to, as I mentioned earlier, drop a cleaner kick play. Well, I'm going to have that play already drawn up. And I'm going to already have practiced that play to be like, hey, remember this play? And this is what we're going to do when we go back out there in 22 seconds. So I like the idea of, I'm always in my girls or players, but the clock doesn't stop.
Yeah, I'm against that. I think the clock has to stop because once you call that timeout, you've got to wait for your players to come over.
Mhm.
So now you probably lost 5 seconds because you're waiting on the farthest player on the other side of the field to be going all the way over,
Right.
so they can see what the game plan is. So I think you have to stop the clock. The question is going to be is if we're given 30 seconds or 1 minute, when does that clock start
Yeah.
for that 30-second time limit? And that's really going to be subjective to the refs.
But also doesn't that subjectivity answer your question? When does the clock start? When does the timeout clock start? All right, I call a timeout. I get 90 seconds. So
That makes more sense.
my keeper better be busting their butt to get over there and
That
talk.
makes way more sense because
Like,
now they've got time to come over.
yeah.
You got 45 seconds to talk. They go back to positions.
And go back in the
game gets back on.
So I don't. So maybe the 30 second. I don't know why you and I both keep saying 30 seconds. Maybe that's unrealistic in the
Right.
game that we play.
Right.
But all right, give me 90 seconds, and then now I don't have to stop the clock. And hey, they come over. You know, if I call a timeout with 2 minutes left, if I can get my girls back on the field with a minute left to kick that game-winning corner, it's plenty of time.
So, who ultimately has, I guess, the decision to make if this becomes a rule? Obviously, is this an American thing? Are we going to FIFA with this rule? Are we implementing this in European leagues? You know, what's the grand scale of how this timeout should be implemented? Because if this is just a timeout rule, now you're kind of affecting how it affects everything else around the world. So what's your outlook on, you know, is it American, European, worldwide? What are we looking at?
I mean, it's going to start at the U.S. soccer, right? That's where it's going to start. Just like that stupid heading rule.
It's
gonna
started on that.
It's going to start at the U.S. soccer. And then, and then, I don't know, does it develop? Who knows? And again, maybe in a year and a half, you and I have this conversation, and I can look at you and be like, hey, I was wrong. Timeout in soccer is stupid. I don't think I will, but I think you started at the U.S. soccer, or maybe you started at KHSAA. You'd say, starting it.
Yeah.
Start at the middle school level where they are still learning the game. And now I can call a timeout to teach.
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle is the implementation.
Yeah.
Is making sure all the coaches understand, am I giving you 2 minutes? Am I giving you 90 seconds?
Yeah.
Clock running. And I think that's the experimental stage if you do go along with that. And you're going to get a lot of pushback of, I want it this way, or this coach wants it that way. It's finding that medium where everyone's like, yeah, I can live with that.
Well, I know you and I are on opposite ends of this spectrum, but I don't think experimenting with a timeout ruins anything. Like, we do it for a year or 2 years and see how, see what we think, see what we like. I think it just brings an added, and I know you have more questions, and I'm not meaning to wrap up my side, but I think it just gives an added element to almost to the coaching side of things. Like, it gives me as a coach, and we see in all the sports, like, how many times have you seen a football coach or a basketball coach call a timeout and the player grab their head or jump up because they're like, no, we were getting ready to do something good, right?
Right.
Because the timeout's called at the wrong time.
Right.
But I think as a soccer coach, there are so many moments that I end up messaging you about. I'm like, hey, I wish I had a timeout right now. that could change the shape of a game where inches matter. Where basketball, a goal, or a shot, or whatever. Of course they matter, but but there's so many shots made and there's so much defense play. But in soccer, I think that's what's great about the game. So many little things matter. And if, as a coach, I can change those little things for my team, I feel like I should be able to have the opportunity to do that.
So I'm sure I know the answer to this question because you're pretty passionate about the timeout thing. Do we really believe a timeout is going to make the game better? Are we making the game better by implementing this timeout experiment? So,
Yeah, no,
I mean, that's really the gist of it.
no,
Really, why we're making real changes,
right.
is it making the game better?
I think better is a weird word here. And I feel like you struggle with that word too. You didn't want to use the word better.
Sure.
So better may not be the correct word, but I think it makes the game more intriguing. I think it makes the end of matches more fun. I mean, we just watched the Olympics where the U.S. won gold, and two of their final two matches they scored in extra time.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. The quarterfinal and the semifinal they scored in extra time to win.
True.
I mean, you don't think Emma Hayes wishes she could call a timeout in those situations and be like, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to win this game. I think it makes the game more intriguing. Does it make it better? I don't know. Maybe not. But, again, I go back to my scenario. Could you imagine on May 31st or whatever when the EPL season ends, and it's Arsenal and Liverpool playing for the EPL title with, 3.5 minutes left and Arsenal owns a corner, being able to watch those coaches in that moment draw up something incredible, whether it's defensive or attacking, whatever side you're on,
Mm-hmm.
I think that adds so much intrigue to the game. And as a fan, you get to see what those coaches do. I think as a soccer coach, people don't get to see what we do a lot. So I feel like it would add more intrigue.
I think that's where this whole conversation should start if people are really serious about adding a timeout. You're going to all the pro leagues and asking the head coaches. You're not asking the players. You're not asking the front offices. You're talking to the head coaches. What is your feeling of implementing a timeout into our game, into this league, whatever league that may be, and really get an idea of, does Emma Hayes feel that way?
Right.
Does Jurgen Klopp feel that way? Does Mikel Arteta see a need for a timeout? And now we can have a real discussion about implementing this timeout scheme and changing the future of soccer.
I think we should do a poll.
I'd love to do a poll. To be honest, I want to send a poll to some European countries and their coaches, even if it's just their club coaches.
Right.
What's your view of that? Are you on Coach Hamilton's side? Or this is going to really change the value of the product on our field? Or me, more the traditional of either you're ready or you're not kind of deal, and your teaching mentality and the teaching moments as we go along here?
I'm not afraid to admit that I think I would lose that poll on every level. I don't think any soccer coach is going to vote for a timeout, honestly. However, I think there are merits to a timeout, and I guess that's maybe what I'm trying to say. There are merits to a late game timeout, to a late match timeout that are overlooked sometimes. That, it all goes back to the players, right? I can call 100 timeouts, but if my players can't do it, then I'm going to lose.
True.
And I can call 100 timeouts, and if I have the better players, I'm probably going to win. But I just think in those tight matches where teams are equal and it's fun and it's intense. You know, you bring that added element of a coach's creativity into the game.
I hear you.
All right, Coach. Well, this was a lot of fun. I don't think either one of us convinced the other to come to their side, but this was our timeout episode, and we've talked about this episode a lot, and we have flirted with it a lot, but I think it was really good. You know, again, we're on different sides, and I don't think either one of us are coming over to the other side.
Probably not.
But it was a lot of fun. We'd love to hear your take. We will definitely post a poll. This has been the Ace Football Academy, Coach Hamilton, alongside Coach Dunham. As always, go kick some ace.